Right then, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting of City York Council's Area Planning Committee. For the benefit of those at home, my name is Councillor Hollier. I'm chairing the committee today. On either side of me, down the side, we've got the other 6 members of the committee. On my left, we've got Sarah White, who's the Democracy Officer, and on my right, Becky Eads, who's the Council's Head of Development Services. We move on then to the agenda. So I can see Councillor Coolwick was written in error as attendance on the agenda, so just correcting that, Councillor Daubney is in attendance. I can't see any other apologies or substitutes to note. We move on then to declarations of interest and go to Councillor Fisher.
I must declare a prejudicial interest in item 6 on the agenda, since I am the uncle of the applicant.
Thank you. I will also be leaving the meeting for agenda 6 because the applicant is my fellow ward colleague, and I guess in a sort of similar way to Councillor Crawshaw and Councillor Kilbane a while ago, our relationship has tipped over into the social as well as the sort of professional. So I think, yeah, on balance, better I don't attend that. So at that point, I think Councillor Fisher and I will probably awkwardly sort of leave the meeting, and Councillor Crawshaw will take over. Minutes of the last meeting. So I think this is the meeting before the last meeting. If there are any comments or issues with them. Can't see any. We're happy for me to sign them then. I will do after the meeting. Move on then to public participation. There's no speakers under the general remit of the committee, so I think we can move straight on to agenda item 5, which is 37 Mitchell Way. Becky, if you could start us with a updating presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So the first item on the agenda is 37 Mitchell Way. It's a change of use of dwelling house. It's come off. Do you want me to start again? Shall I start again? Okay. So 37 Mitchell Way, it's a change of use of dwelling house to a house in multiple occupation. The application is retrospective. The first plan that you can see on the screen behind me is the site plan. The application site is just where you can see my arrow here. Slide 2 is the elevations and the floor plans. Just to note that they are existing. These elevations, as you can see, and the floor plans in here. And these are the floor plans of the proposal. You can see that there is a slight change here. This lounge area here has gone to a bedroom, and what was previously bedroom 4 is now private storage. So next I'll show you some photographs of the site. This is 37 Mitchell Way, January 2021. See the application site there. This is looking east. To 37 Mitchell Way is on your left. Again, you can see that the car there. And this was taken last night at 7 p.m. looking west along Mitchell Way here. And again, you can see the application site is just here. And this is, again, blue car to the right.
Sorry, Chair. Becky, are you using a mouse or an indicator?
Yeah, can you see it?
No.
Oh, you can't. That would have helped, wouldn't it? Hang on, let me see what I can do.
I think we got most of it, but
Hang on. Yeah, where the blue car is. I don't know why you can't see my... Hang on, let me try something different. You see it now? You can see it now, can't you? Just change it to... No. There we are. You see it there? That's the application site. We can just see that blue. Yeah, you can see it now. There. And again, this is the number 37, is the centre of the photograph. Again, 7 o'clock last night. There. You just see that there. Okay. That's it in terms of the presentation. In terms of the update, there's an update to paragraph 5.17. And for clarification, the land registry documents indicate that a visitor car parking bay is not in the ownership of number 37. There's also been further neighbour responses, which are detailed in the additional information that members have got in front of them. That's it for your update. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just ask if there are any questions at this point in the committee. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. Has anyone from the council actually been ascertained whether in fact there are two car parking places? I've literally just come from the place now and I'm absolutely certain I could not park two cars end to end on that drive.
The case office has been out and has checked the plans in relation to the information that's submitted, and they consider that it was acceptable in terms of the two car parking spaces.
Councillor Caution.
Thanks, Chair. Just on that point, Councillor Fisher, I think in the document that we've been sent with the photographs, you can see the oil marks from two cars parked. There's the flagged paving, and then there's the tarmacked area, which I think is within the boundary. So I think that it's tight, but I think that there's clearly two cars being parked on the front there.
The rear end anything small but they're large enough to
Okay. Councillor Crackle.
Thank you. Just a couple of small detail questions. It may just be me that I can't see where this is, but could you clarify where the access is to the bin store and the bike store? I know it's in the back. It says it's in the back in a garage, doesn't it? Is that right? But how does it actually get there? I noticed on one of the photographs, you can see some bins just sort of piled up at the front, near the front, almost at the front of the house. Is it wide enough to get in and out easily with bins and bikes?
1 second, I'm just checking where it is. Yeah, there's the access down the side of the property to the cycle storage and bins. That's existing as it is now, so that's not changing as part of this application.
Right, okay.
Because it's already in use is the property.
Yeah. Well, as I say, you can see the bins are at the front, can't you? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so it's probably just wide enough, sort of thing. Yeah. And is there amenity space at the back? Is there a garden? There is. Okay. I just can't see on these plans. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Can't see any further questions at this point, so I think we can move on then to our speakers. And if Mrs. Anne-Marie Richard, if you're available to speak to us now.
Yes, hello, sorry, I was just having trouble unmuting myself.
No worries at all. Yeah, you'll have 3 minutes to address the committee, and then at the end of the 3 minutes, there may be some questions from the committee as well. But if you could go sort of as clearly and sort of slowly as you can, really, and I'll give a bit of extra time to cover that. Obviously, it's coming over the sort of loudspeakers, so yeah, we need to listen quite hard to make sure we hear everything. But yeah, as clearly as possible.
Sure. Yeah, has Sarah also spoken to you? I do struggle sometimes with my words because I have MS, so I did actually send an email in, and I was told that I could have some extra time.
Yeah, it's no problem at all. If you want to just make a start in your own time and.
Okay, thank you. So any comments I make on the retrospective planning application 437 are observations as I live directly next door. The property was purchased in January of 2017. Work was carried out to the property in February 2017, and the tenants moved in soon after this date, meaning that the property has been used as multiple occupancy for over 4 years, yet the planning application states from March 2020. There are 7 people living in the property, 5 males and 2 females. Living next door and working from home, I see the same people coming and going all day, every day. There have been more than 6 people living at the property for most of the last 4 years. The original planning application was for maximum 5 number occupants. Therefore, this is a breach of the application. The application was changed to 6 residents without advice. The owner is not adhering to this at present, so why would he going forward? Currently, there are 7 vehicles belonging to the tenants, consisting of 5 cars, 1 van and a 3.5-ton commercial vehicle. The vehicles are parked on the 2 parking spaces on number 37's driveway, the rest being parked on the public highway on Mitchell Way opposite numbers 2 to 10. The vehicles regularly park on the raised crossing ramp, restricting access for its intended purpose. Sometimes a car boxes the commercial vehicle and a car in on the owner's driveway, restricting access for numbers 29 to 35 for emergency services. The owner claims that he has 4 allocated parking spaces. This is incorrect. The 2 visitor spaces adjacent to numbers 39 and 37 are visitor parking spaces. These are not allocated to any property. The 4 visitor spaces are clearly marked on the map as VP, showing that they are exactly that, visitor parking, and are not allocated to any property. As per the planning application, the owner only has 2 car parking spaces on his driveway, which are his. See the map from the land registry detailing the area owned by number 37. The way in which the vehicles are parked in Mitchell Way is a breach of highway safety and the covenant. Parking so far on the pavement that they barely leave 0.4 of a metre for pedestrians to access. This is by no means enough space for a pushchair, mobility scooter or wheelchair to get through, rendering the path not fit for purpose. I've regularly seen people in the middle of the road with pushchairs and young children making their way in and out of Mitchell Way in the middle of the road as they are unable to use the pavement. All the properties in Mitchell Way have a restrictive covenant registered with the land registry. Number 37 clearly states not to park any commercial vehicle, caravan or boat on the property or estate road. This is evidenced by the owner's own photograph uploaded to the planning application showing the commercial vehicle parked on the driveway. Also to be noted on the covenant, not to park on or obstruct the estate roads or access ways. Based on Elizabeth's report, 5.7, the applicant has sufficient space for additional cars to park. Where are these? The condition of the property is of a high standard. The front of the property is never maintained and is unsightly from the street. The increased level of residents will not have an adverse impact on noise levels. There is loud music, which can be heard blaring out from cars late into the night from these tenants. The change of use in the number of residents will not result in a loss of front garden for hard-standing parking, which does detract from the existing street scene. This is not the case as all the plants and the grass have been removed and it's concrete. Appendix E states that HMOs should provide 1 parking space per 2 bedrooms. The owner does not have this. Policy HE4 requires proposals to have no adverse effect on the character and appearance of the area. The area appearance has changed since the owner bought the property and rented it to his tenants. 5.9, HMOs can create littering and rubbish accumulation, noise between dwellings, especially at night, and increased parking pressures. These are all affected.
Sorry, could you wrap up now, please, Mrs. Murray?
5.10, the council will seek to ensure that the change of use will not be detrimental to the overall residential amenity of the area. This has already had a detrimental effect over the last 4 years as per the complaints. Please take into account all of my points as a strong objection to the planning application, and please take into account all the photographic evidence that I've sent through over the last couple of days to Sarah White. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just ask if the committee have got any questions. I can't see any, so I'll just thank you for your time this evening, Mrs. Richard. You'll be able to continue watching on the council's YouTube channel, but you'll be sort of taken out of the meeting at this point. But thank you for your comments.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Thank you.
We could move on then to Mr. Carlton Owen, who's also speaking in objection. Are you able to hear me?
Hi there. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you clearly. You'll have heard earlier that you've got 3 minutes to address the committee, and if you could speak, I guess, a little slower than you normally would and as clearly as possible, just to help us in the room. But yeah, if you're able to make a start in your own time.
Yeah, well, just to carry on from what Anne-Marie has said, I've lived there for 18 years in Mitchell Way, and the actual area has gone down in the past few years since this multiple occupation has been started. As she said, that the road itself, there are cars parked down the road, which is partly on the pavement, which makes it unsafe for people to walk down the road. Mothers with children are going to have to walk down the road. People with disability problems are walking down the road, not on the pavement. It's causing problems for everybody, really. The house is not made for this kind of purpose. It's a one driveway house, and you've converted the lawn into a second driveway. And as Anne-Marie said, it hasn't got any more parking in front of the house. The large commercial vehicle parked on the driveway is a hindrance. It's right in the view of my living room window. It is a commercial vehicle. The landlord of the property says it's not a commercial vehicle. I work in the motor trade, and it is a commercial vehicle, and it's not allowed to be on the premises, parked in the driveway. There's all these things which are causing the residents of Mitchell Way stress and hassle. The people that live there don't really care what they do. They drive with their cars, their music loud. One individual always comes round the corner, blowing his music in his car late at night. One evening last week, the windows were open wide from number 37, the living room window, which is now a bedroom. And into the early hours of the morning, there was loud conversations from the house, which disturbed me because obviously it's warm now in the spring and summertime, and the windows are wide open. It's just causing, as I say, a lot of stress for the residents who've lived there for a long time, and it's strongly opposing this application for what he wants to do, really. And it's actually, as Anne-Marie said, it was actually started from February 2017 when you had these people living in the house, not from last year as he's proposed. But yeah, there's just several things against us, really. Especially for the safety factor of people walking down the road. Is that okay?
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
If you could just hang on the line for a second, I'll just ask if there are any questions from the committee. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for coming and speaking to us today. There's a lot of issues that you've raised there that are around sort of antisocial behaviour and things, and I think one of the issues that the committee will sort of struggle with in a way is the way that planning legislation works versus the other methods by which you might address some of those issues. Have you, in those 4 years since it's been operating as an HMO, have you made complaints to neighbourhood enforcement or public protection around noise? And similarly, have the police been involved at all in moving on any highways obstructions or anything like that?
No, myself, no, but the police have been called from my neighbours. Anne-Marie Richards lives right next door to the property, and she's had problems before, with noise. And one of the drivers of the vehicle, the house is a semi-detached townhouse joined onto Anne-Marie, and I think a year ago or so, one of the drivers who lives there drove into the property and actually shook the house, which Anne-Marie and Simon felt. The police was called, and she has actually logged several complaints to the police about the problems that she's faced there, really. I've not called the police myself, personally, but it has been done. And, things have been happening, where there's a smell of weed coming from the house as well. There are things happening which we shouldn't have to put up with, really.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any further questions at that point. So similarly, Mr. Rowan, thank you for your time this evening, and your comments will be taken into account by the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Move on then, finally to Councillor Smalley.
Hello, Chair. Hello, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you fine. Yep, you'll know you've got 3 minutes to address the committee and to hang on the line afterwards just in case there are any questions. Would you like to make a start in your own time?
Thank you very much. I'm speaking today as one of the local ward councillors for Rawcliffe and Clifton Without, and I'm also a parish councillor on Rawcliffe Parish Council, where this application is located. I'll try not to cover exactly the points the public speakers have made, but I will just touch on a few key points. As this application is retrospective, we have, of course, the benefit of hindsight. That is to say, we know exactly what the impacts of this application may be. Paragraph 5.7 of your report today refers to paragraph 5.53 of policy H8 in regard to the need for the council to ensure that the change of use will not be detrimental to the overall residential amenity of the area. I think we can see, and has been seen, how this application as it's currently being used is indeed detrimental to the residential amenity of the area. In particular, there is a stated need within the policy for sufficient space for potential additional cars to park. I think local residents have been clear about how there isn't enough on-street parking or sufficient off-street parking spaces that are exclusive to this property. Indeed, the update from officers today confirmed that the visitor parking is not exclusive for the use of number 37, as has been contested by the applicant. In principle, I'm of course not against large homes changing use to HMOs. Indeed, I've benefited myself personally from local HMOs in the Rawcliffe and Clifton Without area, and we do have a shortage of local single-bedroom properties locally. Having said this, clearly not all roads are suitable for HMOs, and I and many local residents strongly feel that Mitchell Way is one such road locally. Mitchell Way is a modern cul-de-sac. There's certainly not sufficient off-street parking currently for the dwellings on the road, and indeed there wasn't nor either before number 37 changed use. As local ward councillor, residents have raised concerns in relation to antisocial behaviour we've just touched on, and this chiefly appears to be a consequence of the lack of adequate parking spaces for the number of vehicles the occupants have. The current situation puts residents into direct conflict with one another, and it is a situation that neither local neighbours or, I'm sure, the occupants of this property are happy with. There has also been concerns raised about other low-level ASB relating to the disposal of waste, and again, as we've just heard, the use and smoking of cannabis publicly, which of course all have an impact on the local residential amenity. I myself live just over the hedge on the other side of Hurricane Way, and I do know firsthand that these complaints certainly have foundation. As stated in the report before you, Rawcliffe Parish Council did object to this application, principally as the council were concerned that there is insufficient parking to service this house of multiple occupancy. Finally, we are concerned that the decision before you, if approved, could set a precedent for further dwellings on Mitchell Way to change use to HMOs, and given the impact of this just one HMO, this is a serious concern and one that has the ability to very significantly impact the local residential amenity in years to come. On these grounds and the issues raised by public speakers, I'd of course urge members to vote to refuse this application this evening. Thank you for your time today, and I'm of course very happy to answer any questions members may have.
Okay, thank you. I'll just ask if there are any questions. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Councillor Smalley. My question is around sort of the issue on the street, which is really important to this application, but it's very, very difficult from a planning ground to identify things that we can and can't do. And I wondered if you could list, as the local councillor or one of the local councillors, what your local councillor team has done to actually sort of support residents in terms of, you know, I'm just looking at the pictures, and for example, it has an application been made for double yellow lines. It's interesting about, you know, the antisocial behaviour. Have you yourself contacted the police, or have you looked at reporting the commercial vehicle that might not be where it should be? Things like that, just so we can get a broader picture of what involvement there is.
Yeah, no, so I won't. I know you've got other applications, and I know you don't want to be sitting in West offices all evening. So I'll try and keep my answer relatively brief.
If you could just speak a bit slower, that would be, whilst being brief, okay. Slower would help.
Okay, no, sorry. I think we have obviously done several things locally. I would contest that, and is often the case in this part of Rawcliffe and Clifton Moor, that adding double yellow lines to a cul-de-sac like Mitchell Way wouldn't necessarily help, and indeed the local roads such as Broadstone Way equally have problems with on-street parking. I think it is a design of the estate that when it was built there wasn't enough on-street or off-street parking. Obviously I wasn't around at the time, and actually in terms of Mitchell Way, and you'll probably be able to see from the site plan, a lot of the properties all obviously have front-facing driveways, and that does restrict the amount of space on the road that you could ever put double yellow lines on in the first place. Those double yellow lines would also have to be further away from this property, and therefore you'd actually restrict visitor parking to the whole street, which obviously, you know, doesn't necessarily solve, well, while solves one problem, potentially creates far more problems. I would say no, personally, I haven't called the police. However, obviously we are aware through the local policing reports of issues that have been raised today by public speakers, and I would just say that, you know, in terms of just finally, the problem that you've raised today would mainly be alleviated if this application was refused. And in terms of planning grounds, I believe that the second point of paragraph 5.53 of policy H8, in that then the council needs to consider if there's sufficient space for potential additional cars to park. I think this is probably one of the clearest examples I've ever seen of a HMO application that clearly doesn't have that space for potential additional cars, because we can see today on the street and in recent days, as planning officers have seen, there clearly isn't enough space for the occupants to park locally. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. See if there are any further questions, Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair, and good evening, Councillor Smalley. Mine's a similar question to Councillor Webb's in a way. He mentioned double yellow lines. I have parts of my ward where there's significant problems with people parking on the pavements, and I fully sympathise with how difficult that is for people with any kind of mobility issues or pushchair users or what have you. And the way that we've tried to deal with it in the parts of the ward that I represent is by looking at res park zones, which particularly when you've got streets with off-street parking, it can be a quite straightforward way of managing a lot of vehicles at a single property. So I guess, first of all, I'm interested to know whether or not you've given any consideration to that, because that may well be a way of resolving the problem. And then the other question or thing I'd just be interested in your views on, because you mentioned about yourself having lived in HMOs, and I think HMOs do get a bad rep, and actually they're a really important part of the housing stock. In this particular location though, this is a 5-bed property. If it was a single dwelling with, say, 2 adults and 2 or 3 teenage children, there's no reason why there couldn't be 3 or 4 cars associated with a single dwelling, whether it was an HMO or whether it was just a single house. So how would you envisage the parking problems being alleviated by it not being an HMO under that circumstance?
Thank you, Councillor Crawshaw, for that question. I think starting from the last point, and sorry, it might need reminding in terms of the questions that you wanted to pose on the impact of this HMO in particular as compared to a single domestic dwelling, I think it's clear, and one of the public speakers stated today, that there are indeed 7 vehicles, one of which a commercial vehicle associated with this property. I mean, unless, like you say, of course, a dwelling with, like you say, teenagers might have 2, 3, 4 cars. I think unless it was sort of Jeremy Clarkson moving in, you're really not going to have 7 cars associated with a single dwelling. And we've seen with this application being retrospective that really has happened. It's consistently happened, I assume, as people have moved in and out. And it's a constant issue that detrimentally affects the local residential amenity. In terms of Res Park, again, and I completely concur exactly with what you said in terms of the impact of parking on pavements, and it's a constant scourge locally. And not a single road in Rawcliffe and Clifton Without is Res Parks at the moment. So obviously, there's obviously, I guess, a reason for that historically. I'd say similar to my answer on W lines, given the local pressures in terms of people parking in local streets to get around the time limits at some of the shopping sites. I don't think, and also so the local parking pressures on Broadstone Way and other local roads on the way to Mitchell Way. I think it would just push the problem elsewhere. And I think it's one of those questions about where do you stop? Do you Res Park the whole ward? And finally, a bit like my answer to Councillor Webb, I think whilst these are all potential solutions, and obviously going forwards, and there's nothing like a planning application that gets out local issues like this one. Obviously, we can discuss that. However, all of these issues would be alleviated if the committee tonight voted to refuse. And I think there absolutely is the planning grounds for that decision. And I think that obviously the officers themselves have recognised that it is a balance when you consider this need for additional car spaces to park. And I hope that answers your questions. Obviously, I'm happy to come back if I've sort of missed any one of your points.
Thank you. I can't see any further questions. So thank you, Councillor Smalley.
Thank you.
Go back then. If there are any questions for Becky at this point. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. And I appreciate we did have a very brief discussion about it before the meeting started because we thought it might be raised. This issue that's been brought up by 3 different speakers about the covenant and a commercial vehicle, how might that be enforced? What?
Not through planning, I think, is the simple answer to that. It's not in a planning condition, so that's potentially legally, but I can't answer that because it's not planning related.
Thank you.
Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. This might be a relatively simple question. But if we were minded to approve this HMO application, would that actually make it easier or harder to manage the cars problem, or would it actually not really make any particular difference?
Difficult to answer that, but it potentially could be used by, if it was classed as a dwelling, you can have it, I think it's up to 5 unrelated individuals anyway. So to tip it to 6, it's only that additional one person that you're looking at, and the additional car parking that one person could bring on the balance of where the application is. It doesn't, do you see where I'm trying to go with my explanation here, in terms of you could have it being used by a family that could have 4 or 5 cars, or you could have it used by HMO up to 6 that could have 6 cars. But the policy is clear that it's a maximum standard for HMOs that you'd be looking to 2 to 3. So I think I was just double checking in the 5.14, where it says there is a maximum within the DCLP states, which excuse me, hang on. If you just read from the second sentence onwards, it basically explains why we've got to where we've got to in terms of that. And the maximum requirement for a 5-bedroom HMO would be 2 or 3 car parking spaces. And that would potentially be the same for a house of a 4-bed. So not a lot really, is that kind of answered your question, but not quite.
Yeah, so essentially, if we were to approve this, we could say, and you're only allowed 2 or 3 parking spaces, and we could obviously control for, say, 2, for example.
There's only 2 shown on this plan.
Exactly,
It's definitely,
and
the visitor parking isn't part of
Yeah.
it, so yes, it's definitely just 2.
But actually, that's got nothing to do with the parking on the street or the parking in the visitor spaces. That's got nothing to do with this application, has it?
No, well, this, you've got to assess the proposal in front of you in terms of if that additional person in that house is going to cause that increase in car parking to a degree that isn't acceptable. That's where we've got to in terms of the recommendation. We've looked at it as around what it is now, what it's going to, and that the increase is minimal, and that we don't think that it's going to cause the harm that would let us recommend refusal. But obviously members might think different.
Okay, Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. We have quite a lot of these sort of HMOs where the issue is what the impact of parking is in the wider area. And I know that on a couple of occasions, we've had conversations about whether there's a way of restricting the number of vehicles associated with it. I know in the report, the agent's saying that, you know, if parking was an issue, I'd change the tenancy agreements to limit to 2 vehicles. But I mean, that's a bit of a nothing, is it? It's not something that's relevant to us as a planning committee, and it's not something that's enforceable necessarily. But I think that there has been larger developments where it's been 0 car developments, and that has been possible to do. Do you know if any conversations have been had with relation to this particular application about what might be an enforceable way of restricting the number of vehicles associated with it, or is there just nothing that could be done from a planning perspective to restrict the number of vehicles?
Sorry, forgot. From a planning point of view, they've showed 2 car parking spaces. That's what we considered acceptable. You couldn't reasonably enforce that they can't park elsewhere on the highway, because that's outside of the remit of this planning application, basically. Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Webb.
I think sort of on the same vein, really. And I've seen some applications we'd get updates from highways and updates from sort of fire and ambulance, things like that. And I know that several speakers spoke about the fact that it could end up being dangerous because the road is sort of enclosed, and could ambulances and fire engines and things get down there or not. Is the reason that isn't involved in this report because it's sort of not part of this application, or is it because we just didn't ask?
Sorry, just for my clarification,
So if you were building new houses, then
Yeah.
normally there would be a question about is there suitable access to that road to the end of that street or something like that?
Yes.
Is the road wide enough to get vehicles down it, emergency vehicles or something like that? Now in this application, there's nothing like that, but I assume that's because that isn't relevant to this application.
Because it's a change of use. It's already in use as a house. So you've got to think about the reasonableness of where you're looking at. And if it's in use as a house, the step to a HMO by that additional, the additional use in that, that's where we've said, well, that's not really reasonable for us as a planning authority to ask for that extra level of detail for a HMO, given it's surrounded by existing C3 residential dwellings. Where would the reasonableness be in asking for that? That's why we haven't.
Yeah, no, that clarifies, because obviously several
Yes.
speakers brought it up. Thank you.
Councillor Crawshaw.
Sorry, we're slightly tag teaming here. I'm not meaning it to. It's just he's asking questions, making me think of something. Page 15 on the conditions. The first condition talks about a detailed written management plan for the property, and it talks about noise and consideration to neighbours, garden maintenance, refuse and recycling, etc. Is there any reason why we couldn't include that it should also have advice around parking responsibly and giving consideration to, you know, neighbour amenity when parking vehicles associated with the property.
I suppose it's a level of information that you'd expect a part of that. We could potentially do it as an informative that would expect them to park responsibly. Yes, you could, but I don't know what, there is 2 car parking spaces associated with this. I don't know what extra potentially is enforceable from a planning point of view in terms of if we say we're expecting them to, but it's not within this site. So is that, it's not within the site of this?
Well, I guess what I'm thinking is, because obviously an HMO also has to be licensed. So
Yes.
there's the planning side of it, and
Yes.
then there's the licensing side of it. And if there's a detailed management plan that's written that also includes, you know, these general things about the use of the property, but also perhaps something about if additional vehicles over and above the 2 are parked in the neighbourhood, you know, it just perhaps gives another grounds for, if it continues to be a problem, the licensing side of things might be an alternative way of regulating this. Because
I know, I get what you're saying, but
I'm just trying to make it a more robust.
I get that, but I don't know that your planning process is going to be able to be that robust for it, given that, will it necessarily be enforceable given the situation that's already in existence in the area? Is it reasonable? So yes, you could put something in there, but it's exact. I don't know necessarily that it'd work exactly how you're wanting it to work. We could ask for details of it, but in terms of is it enforceable, I don't necessarily think it would be, and I don't think it's going to have the teeth that potentially you want it to have to be able to comply with being a reasonable condition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I think where I was thinking was that if the HMO has to be licensed and then it continues to be a problem, it might be a grounds by which the license might not be renewed at a future date, because we can change the use of it, but in order to operate,
Yes.
it still has to be
But
licensed.
that'd be their separate legislation rather than planning. So we can, yes, we talk to each other on a regular basis, but let me have a think about if there's anything we could do about that. But my initial reaction is I'm not sure how enforceable that it could possibly be.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Crackhill, I'll let you go first.
Sorry, I just wanted to check if I was understanding this correctly, going back to the numbers and the change of use. You've got at 5.22, you point out that if we were to approve this application, then the maximum number of residents can be 6. So although you were talking about 6 being an potential increase from 5, if we didn't approve it, wouldn't the situation just stay as it is, where residents believe, surrounding neighbours believe there are 7 there at the moment? So if we approve it, you could actually enforce a smaller number.
7 becomes a large HMO, which is a sui generis use class, so that would then need a further planning application. From the information we have and from visits that housing have done just before Christmas, they did see that there were 6 people there. So from the information that we have at the moment, it seems that there are 6 people there. But if it's not the case, we can obviously look towards an enforcement investigation, work with our housing colleagues and see if that's the case. And if that is the case, then they would need to apply for planning permission for a larger HMO. What does that was your question, wasn't it? There was nothing else.
Yeah, so although approving it, means 6 can be enforced. If we didn't approve it, they would be expected to put in another planning application. Yeah.
So that it's not very easy to hear, is it?
Although approving it would mean that 6 maximum could be enforced, if we didn't approve it, actually you're saying they would be required to put in a fresh application if it was thought there were 7 people there.
Yeah, well, we know it's retrospective at the moment.
Yeah.
We know that there are 6 people in there, hence
Right.
why they've applied for planning permission.
Okay.
So it is being used now as a HMO, we know that, so that's what they've applied for. What I'm saying is if there are 7 people in there, or if there is evidence to prove that there's 7 people in there, that would then require a further planning application, because that would then be a larger HMO.
So that applies whether we approve it or not, if,
Yes, yes.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. In terms of a question from me, I'm struggling, I guess, to reconcile it's Appendix E, isn't it? Provide 1 car parking space per 2 bedrooms, so, the standards for HMOs, with the policy H8 needs for the applicant to demonstrate there's sufficient space for potential additional cars to park. I guess, how do those 2 policies sort of interact? Because I can see that there's the 2 spaces, but there doesn't now seem to be a demonstration that there's sufficient space for additional or potential additional cars to park. What does it mean by potential additional cars? 5.7. The second bullet point.
Well, they can work together, don't they? That policy, that's the link with the other policy that we have in terms of the specific guidance for parking services. So there is sufficient potential additional cars. Yes, but if we use the policy that we're using consistent with others, which is the one that's illustrated in 5.4, it's marrying those together. I see what you're saying, but we are aware of consistently on the information of 5.4.
So the standard is 2 spaces. In addition to that, there is a sort of policy requirement for the applicant to demonstrate that there's sufficient space for, I assume potential additional cars means over and above the 2. I guess where we've looked before, and we've had similar sort of schemes in Oswaldwick, you've got quite big, long streets, and I guess previously they've sort of pointed out that cars can park around the cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
Things like that. I guess in this case,
there are visitor spaces in the vicinity that we know of, but we do know that they're heavily used. And we do know that this area, there is quite a lot of ad hoc parking. So, but it's making that balance, isn't it, of the recommendation and the impact of this proposal in relation to what could be there and what was there previously. So it's all about the balance, basically. As we tell you all the time, it is that balance of, yes, it could be used.
so the applicant's argument is that those 2 visitor spaces demonstrate that there is sufficient additional space. Is that their argument?
I think it was used, but that obviously in the original application they said that they were theirs, and that's been proved that they weren't. So you can't rely on that being theirs. It is just that there are visitor car parking spaces in the vicinity, but it'd be remiss if we didn't say we do know it's heavily used, because as you can see from the photographs, every time we've been there are people parked there. But it's if it wasn't a HMO, it's a 5-bedroom house, and you could have significant parking associated with a 5-bedroom house.
Councillor Webb?
I think sadly, I mean, if you look at the resident photos that have been sent in, they've kind of demonstrated that there is space for cars to park. They might not like where they are parked, and that might not be right, but that I think is part of the issue here, isn't it? That actually, given the law of the land, they're not parked in the wrong place. I think it's a tough one. I think some of them might well be parked illegally, but there is sufficient space, and that's part of the problem.
Councillor Fisher?
Forgive me if I'm wrong, but surely the policy says that there should be 1 car parking place for every 2 bedrooms, and it should be within the curtilage of the property or under the control of the applicant for that to be a valid consideration. Surely whether you can park elsewhere on the street is not relevant to the policy we've set down.
The application site shows that they can park 2 cars within the site, and the policy is a maximum. So I'm going to refer, just a second, I've lost the page. So yeah, the maximum requirement for a 5-bed HMO would be 2 or 3 car parking spaces. So on that, they've showed 2 within the site, but not 3. But on balance, we've said, given it everything that their house could be used as, that we feel that that's acceptable.
Councillor Daubney?
Can I just be reminded, Becky, at your plans from when you first started your introduction? I'm assuming all the main rooms of the house are being turned into self-contained bedrooms. Am I correct?
Thank you. So if you just look behind me, you can see this as before it was altered. So you have the family room, the kitchen, dining, the lounge, the bedroom, and the 4-bedroom house there. This is as proposed. So you can see basically the lounge goes, adds to the family room. So you've got 1 bedroom there, 1 bedroom, bedroom 2 there, bedroom 3, bedroom 4, bedroom 5, and then private storage. That would not be a bedroom. It's not big enough to be a bedroom.
So as I suspected, 2 public rooms.
2 what, sorry?
2 public rooms.
Public?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got
Reception
your
rooms, if
kitchen,
you like.
dining room at the back. I don't,
Using another
it's all in one from the look of
Reception
it.
rooms. 2 reception rooms have been turned into
Yes.
separate
Yes.
bedrooms.
Yeah.
Now, a normal house, of course, you wouldn't have quite so many people living there because you have those spaces reserved for the family communal use. These people will be living independently, by and large.
Well, there is a
They may
kitchen,
be
dining
friends, they
area.
may not be friends, but you know, they live in their own rooms. So it's liable because they lead independent lives, so they all have a vehicle.
They all have.
A vehicle of some sort. It would be nice if you all had bicycles rather than cars, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
I can't comment on what they own because I don't know what they own. I can only comment in terms of what we'd require of them and that whether or not we consider it acceptable, given what it could have been used as before.
Okay, are there any further questions at this point? Are we happy to move into debate? Can't see any further questions. If anybody would like to, Councillor Fisher?
When I looked at this application, the applicant assured me had the 2 visitor car parking spaces. I really couldn't see any problem with it whatsoever because clearly it's been operating as an HMO, and it's the question is whether we can accommodate that extra bedroom. Now, clearly, the other point about this is a retrospective application, so we can actually look back at what the residents' experiences have been, and we don't have to predict what they might be. Clearly, there have been some issues. Now, I hear what people say about the fact that this house could be a 4-bedroom house with 2 adults, 2 kids or whatever with 4 cars, but we don't have jurisdiction over that. The planning application for that was put in 20 odd years ago. It's built and we can't control that. This is an application to effectively turn a dwelling house into a 5-bedroom HMO. Now, as I see it, our car parking rules, our regulations are 1 car parking space for every 2 bedrooms. This has 5 bedrooms. It should have 2.5 or preferably 3 car parking spaces. And it doesn't meet that criteria, and therefore I cannot support this application. I shall move refusal on the grounds of inadequate car parking.
Okay, thank you. Is anybody willing to second that? Councillor Daubney? Okay, is there any? So in terms of those grounds, before us to go back for debate, I guess if we could just bottom those out a bit. That's policy H.
In terms of inadequate parking, so you mean the inadequate parking would cause overspill, which would then be detrimental to highway safety? Correct. Is that where you're going?
And residential amenity.
And resident.
And residential amenity.
Yep.
Since it clearly has not shown that those 2 visitor car parking spaces are within his exclusive control. And as I look at it, you could not get a 3rd car to make a 3rd car parking space without the rear end of the car poking right across into the actual curtilage, into the actual roadway. So I don't believe there's any possibility of providing a 3rd car parking space, and therefore I believe that any subsequent cars will be parked on the highway to the detriment of other people.
In terms of that as well, I wonder whether we could make reference to them demonstrating sufficient space for potential additional cars. If that's okay with Councillor Fisher.
Okay.
Any further debate? Councillor Crawshay?
Thanks, Chair. I think that's really shaky grounds, unfortunately. The 5.14, if this is what our local plan policy is, it says that 1 space per 2 HMO bedrooms is a maximum, and it should be revised downwards depending on the individual characteristics. So it's saying that we should provide a maximum of 1 space per 2 bedrooms. And if we want to say that there should only be 1 space or no spaces, that would be acceptable, but that we can't require more than that. So we can't require more than 2 spaces for this site under our own policy. If I'm reading that correctly, that's my understanding of it. I think also, just in a more general sense, and I'll obviously want to come back on that point, I think in a more general sense, these sorts of applications are always really tricky. We've had loads of these on these committees, and the parking issue is clearly a significant one. It's a significant issue in all sorts of different parts of the something blown up then. You know, these are issues that affect all sorts of different parts of the city whenever we have these kind of big issues around parking. But our job as a planning committee is to look at the principle of there being an HMO. Now, actually, all those tenants who are currently there could all move out tomorrow, and you could have 5 tenants who all ride their bikes everywhere, and you would immediately have significantly less. To control the parking and control the issues that there are associated with whether it's noise or whether it's antisocial parking or what have you, that's public protection, it's neighbourhood enforcement, it's getting your ward councillors to look at res park schemes or other mechanisms that exist outside of the planning framework. And our job as a planning committee is to make sure that we are applying the planning legislation. And I can't support a refusal because I don't think it would be a robust refusal based on the grounds that we're saying, particularly if we're citing that policy, which I think is quite clear that it does meet.
Councillor Fisher?
Thank you. I take your point, and that could be very true in certain locations, but actually when you go and visit this location, as I have done twice, once in the evening, once during the day, it's Carmageddon. This is a very restricted head of a cul-de-sac with several houses off down a little sort of side shoot off the cul-de-sac. And there is virtually nowhere to park surplus car parking. And clearly, yes, there may be on some cases, you would revise the 3 car parking space or 2.5 down to 2. I don't believe that's right in this location. It is so tight for car parking anyway. There were vans parked on the pavement all over the place. All the visitor car parking places were in use when I went there both times. There is clearly very little surplus. At the moment, this operates as a 4-bedroom house. There are, enough for 7 people in there. We can't change that. That's as it is. But it's the extra room, I think, is going to be the last straw that breaks the camel's back, and I think we should resist it.
Councillor Webb?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Fisher, I think Carmageddon's putting it quite strongly. I think there's large parts of the city centre where this would seem perfectly normal. And actually, in that situation, what you would have is everybody on the streets occupying maybe potentially smaller houses, but everybody having a car. And you would find that the road would look reasonably similar. Or potentially you could have this particular application on this particular street and everyone was in a sweepstake together, they all won the lottery and they all decided to buy an extra car. At that point, everyone would probably add up to 5 or 6 cars, maybe more. And there's nothing we could do about that through planning. And this, I think, is the issue that we've got here. You said quite rightly, this is a retrospective application, so we're going to look back over the last 4 years and look at what has happened. And what I haven't seen happen, unfortunately, and this is why I asked the question, I haven't seen an application for res parking. I haven't seen an application for double yellow lines. I haven't seen reports to the police that you would potentially expect something like this, suggesting that there's a lot of illegal parking going on. And I 100% sympathise with the residents. I absolutely understand what you're trying to do. And I agree. I think the pictures that the residents have presented to us are really, really worrying. But unfortunately, they are not planning issues. And I have to agree with Councillor Crawshaw that the statement you've made about why we should refuse the officer's advice here is tenuous at best. And I genuinely appreciate what it is you're trying to do. And if you can find a better way of doing it, then you might start making some sense. But I think at the minute, I think this is going to be quite tough.
Councillor Fisher.
On that. The rest parking is a complete red herring, because rest parking is to give residents priority, and to keep visitors out, people who might want to park the cars there for work or tourism. This situation here, it's quite clear that nearly all the cars, because nobody else would go and park there unless they live there, they're residents' car parking. So rest parking would make absolutely no difference, nor would double yellow lines. It would just restrict the area where people can put cars, and God knows where they put them then. I reiterate, this is a change of use, and we have control over it. And that's why we have the right, if we wish, to say that this is the last straw that's going to break the camel's back in this cul-de-sac.
Councillor,
yeah, this will be my last point, Chair. I think we have, in the planning application, we have control over what happens within the curtilage of the property. What we don't have control of is what happens on the street. I mean, for example, you could turn around and say, oh, well, actually, there's a HMO here. So actually, somewhere in Haxby, there's a load of parking. So we'll stop that HMO in Rawcliffe because that'll affect that over there. It's the same principle. And I just think it just gets silly. So I'm struggling to support your move.
Thank you. Can't see any for Councillor Ferret.
Thanks, Chair. I think for me, the accessibility issue is really concerning around the parking, because it's not fair on other residents if they're struggling to get past. But I just don't know that there'll be any protections for residents if we don't approve this in line with our recommendation. There's no guarantee. A lot of what we're discussing, it's really hypothetical. And I think based on what the policies are, I don't know that we have the grounds. While I have every sympathy with the residents of the parking situation, I don't think if we don't pass this, there's any guarantee that there'll be more protection for them from the parking situation. If there are different tenants, if it was used by, a private family and they had additional cars, and I think we're getting bogged down in lots of hypotheticals, and we just don't really know what the tenancy is going to be like in 6 months, in 6 weeks. We don't know if it's going to be sold, I feel like the policy is there and it's quite clear, and if they have got those 2 parking spaces, I just don't think we can revise it upwards as is requested.
Thank you. Councillor Cracker.
Thought I should have a couple of comments, but I can be very brief, just summarise a lot of things that have been mentioned. I have, again, obviously have huge sympathy with the residents round about in terms of the parking situation. There are difficulties there, as I can see, but I would agree that it's, I think there would be very tenuous reasons for refusal, really, and also it isn't at all clear what difference it would make to the parking situation if we did refuse this. And I also have sympathy with the notion that, it is appropriate to look at other powers and other measures. There's no simple answer, but I think there are other avenues that could be looked at, but it's not for us to do through planning. So I can't support refusal.
Okay, thank you. I think everybody's had their say. And for my part, I will be supporting the refusal. I think I take the point about whether or not it's arguable on the 2 or 3, but I do think the second bullet point, asking for the applicant to demonstrate, for the applicant to demonstrate there is sufficient space for the potential additional cars to park, and I can't see anywhere that any demonstration of that has happened. And in fact, the sort of thing that was resting on, the ownership of the 2 big sort of visitor spaces over the road, that has now fallen away. And I'll note as well that that was part of the reason that 2 on-site spaces was considered acceptable, because the remaining 1 space within the visitor car parking space is considered to meet the published standards. If that's not in the ownership of the applicant, then I think that causes problems there as well. So I'll be supporting the refusal. But I think we've all now had our say, so I think we're happy to move to the vote. I think, Becky, if you could just give us a quick rundown.
Yep, so the refusal reason would be due to the inadequate car parking provided as part of the proposal would cause highway safety and amenity issues at the site, contrary to policy H8. Okay.
Thank you. If I could then see all those in favour of refusal? Those against? Okay, thank you. I think that's everybody. It's no abstention. So that's fallen. I wonder then if there is an alternative. Councillor Webb?
Thank you, Chair. And as I said earlier, I wholly appreciate what Councillor Fisher was trying to do, and I can understand and appreciate the issues that residents are facing. Unfortunately, those issues are not a matter for the planning department to solve. They're issues that could be solved with the local councillor, and I think that's something that we can do. And Councillor Fisher earlier said that res parking would be a red herring, and that I think that it has its place, and actually it is to support residents with parking issues. What I would say is that I can understand this is a huge concern for local residents, and so with regret I move the officer's recommendation, and I think that this is a huge shame, but I think unfortunately if we were to refuse this, which we've obviously said we don't want to do, but if that was the case we would have lost this on appeal. So for those reasons I move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Did we bottom the addition of the...
I personally don't think that it would be enforceable for us to add something like that. If that's not to say that if you don't want to, but my advice is that it would be very difficult to enforce if you wanted to add something with regard to car parking, which isn't within the remit of the... I just would really struggle with giving you advice saying that that's acceptable, and I don't think it is.
You're happy to take that advice? Okay. Councillor Crushall, I think.
I was going to ask the same question, but I will second Councillor Webb.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any further debate at that point, or shall we move to the vote? I think we can move to the vote. You could just give us, Becky, sorry, a quick...
Yep, so subject to the recommendation on page 15 and the conditions within there. There was no, just double checking, there was no updates to the conditions, so no, subject to the recommendation for approval and the conditions on page 15. Thank you.
Thank you. I could then see all those in favour of the motion. All those against? Sure. That's noted. Yes, that is approved. So thank you, everybody. Move on then to item 6, but before then, Councillor Fisher and I need to leave the meeting. I don't think we need to adjourn. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your time this evening.
Right, I will just let them leave the room, and they have now. So I'll move us on to agenda item 6 then, which is the application for 25 Orchard Paddock, Haxby. So if I could ask Becky just to give us a summary and any updates.
Thank you, Chair. So the application is for a 1.5-storey side and rear extension after demolition of an existing garage with dormers to side and rear and roof lights to the front and rear. Just quickly scroll through here. So hopefully you can see on it. Yes, you can. Brilliant. So this is the application site here. You can see that says dwelling in the garage, which is the existing site plan. Existing here. And this is as proposed. You can see that there's the extensions to the side here. Helpfully, it's coloured for you. So you can see the coloured is the extensions. And again, at first floor here, the alterations there. Don't think you can see. So if you just, this is the change in elevation to the side that you can see here. It's not massively clear. I apologise. It might be better on your agenda. There's a dormer window in here. And oh, that's probably better for you. So you can see that's the proposed 3D view. So that's the rear. You can see the extensions coming along here with the dormer window there and there. That's the roof plan. So you can just see this is the existing property here with the proposed extensions to come out here. And again, the site, oh, that's it for mine. So in terms of additional information, we have requested an additional condition for the side facing window in the south elevation of the side dormer. So this is this one here where I'm pointing out to you, would be obscurely glazed and it should be maintained as such and should be non-opening. That's basically because you're introducing an additional bedroom window in the side elevation in order to protect the neighbours' amenity. We've requested an additional condition for that. That's it for my update. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So members, any questions? Not seeing any. I just had one question, which was just in relation to paragraph 3.1. Haxby Town Council had objected to the original application, and I think there was a front dormer that was subsequently removed, but they'd also had a concern about the proposed side dormer and had requested that that was removed. I think that that's sufficiently addressed in the report in terms of it being deemed proportionate, but I just wondered if you could just reiterate that just so we've covered that.
Yeah. Sorry, I will get used to being back pressing microphones. In terms of the extensions of as a whole, it was considered that the dormer window to the side was acceptable in relation to all the extensions that were happening in the original property, and that it wouldn't be out of character, whereas the dormer to the front potentially would have much more of a visual impact. So on the whole, that's why we made the assessment in terms of that.
Thank you very much. So I think next item is public participation, but we don't have anybody registered to speak on this, so I can move us into debate if anybody would like to. Councillor Webb.
I propose approval as per the officer recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Dorothy?
And the additional condition.
Sorry?
And the additional condition.
I think Mike, please, is going to be the unmute of 2021, isn't it? Becky, if you could just give us the summary then of what we're voting on, and then I will move to the vote.
The application is recommended for approval as detailed on page 31 of your agenda, but also with an additional condition with regard to the obscure glazing in the side elevation of put my teeth in the dormer in the side elevation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much then. So if I could see all those in favour of the proposal as moved, if you could show now. And anybody against? So I make that unanimous. That's carried. So that brings us to the end of today's business. So all it leaves me to do is thank you all for your attendance, and thanks to the technical team for delivering a smooth running meeting, and we will see you all very soon. Thank you.